I saw a beam of light everywhere. And then the moment I saw those beam of light, I thought to myself, the rapture is here.
It's like in the corner of her eyes, seeing like a little boy or like a little ghost going to one of the rooms.
It's a journey in the self too, because you find your intuition and discernment, but we got to realize that there's duality here.
Maybe 6 or 8 times over the course of a couple of years, I would wake up to this dark figure standing at the foot of my bed.
The green agenda is the obliteration of the human soul. They use children to do that. They can't do it without children. They need pure souls, and you cannot conduct a black mass without pure souls.
When you see that there's darkness, Satan exists, or that there's evil on earth, or that there's actually demons or whatever, I think it's a frequency when we're all together, really.
The light started like flicking off and on. So it was like a toddler, like a 5-year-old or 4-year-old.
At one point it started to gruff. I heard howls. I heard like this puffing sound, and I was petrified. I had no idea what it was.
Well, the demons are here, and they are going to steal the children.
Welcome to the show, everybody. You're listening to Apocalyptic Anomalies, where we shine light on the shadows to unlock all the secrets of our universe. I'm your host, Abner J. Valdez. If you have a crazy experience or story you want to share on the show, email me at apocalypticanomalies@gmail.com. That's apocalypticanomalies@gmail.com. Or you can hit me up on Instagram or Facebook. Either way works for me. Just get in contact with me. Today on the show, we have a special guest. We have Vic Cundiff from Dogman Encounters Radio. He comes on the show and shares his encounters with Bigfoot and some Dogman encounters that guests have shared on his show. Let's get into the show right now. Sit back and enjoy the show. Welcome to Apocalyptic Anomalies, everybody. Today on the show, we have Vic Cundiff, a very special guest from Dogman Encounters Radio. Vic, how you doing today?
Doing good. I can't complain. How about yourself, Abner?
I'm doing great, man. Doing great. It's an honor to have you on my show. What can I say about your show? I've just been hooked ever since the first episode. Very, very interesting stuff. Before we start the show, can you also tell the audience where they could find you and your work?
Well, I produce 4 podcasts.
Wow.
I'd say the most popular podcast that I produce is by far and away Dogman Encounters Radio. If you go to dogmenencounters.com, that's the homepage for that website. So yeah, if you have had a Dogman encounter and would like to speak with me after you listen to tonight's show, then yeah, if you just go to dogmenencounters.com and submit a report, I'd be more than happy to talk with you if you need help with your encounter or whatnot. But I've also got a new Bigfoot podcast. I produce 2 Bigfoot podcasts. The newest one is called My Bigfoot Sighting. The URL, the website address for that one is mybigfootsighting.com. And on that podcast, it's really a hands-off on my part podcast where the guests can come on and they can just share the details of their Sasquatch sightings. I've got another Bigfoot podcast that's been around since 2016 called Bigfoot Eyewitness Radio. And on that podcast, I actually interview the guests about their experiences and whatnot. And then lastly would be my newest podcast, which is called My Paranormal Experience. The home base for that website, for that show that is myparaex.com. Oh yeah, for Bigfoot Eyewitness Radio, the website address is bigfooteyewitness.com.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, a lot of great stuff there. I definitely got to check those out. I didn't know you had other podcasts. I kind of just was scrolling one time on Spotify looking for podcasts about like cryptids, monsters, paranormal. And one thing that caught my attention was your logo, the Dogman with the moon and the real mysterious look to it. I was like, oh, let me check this out. What is this about, right? So I clicked it, and then the music kind of pulled me in, the mysterious music, and then the voice, episode 1. I was like, oh, okay, let me listen to this. So very awesome stuff. If you guys haven't checked it out, definitely check it out. And make sure you guys check out all of Vic's new podcasts as well. So the reason why I wanted to bring Vic on the show is because he is a researcher. And I guess you could say somewhat in many words of an expert because of all the stories that people have shared with him, right? So he knows a lot about this topic, this cryptid. So I just want to let Vic, I just want to let you take the floor and just kind of talk to me and the audience about your knowledge about cryptids and dogmen. What can you tell us about that? Please talk to us in details.
Well, before I dive into talking about dogmen, number one, no one's an expert on these guys. Some people consider themselves to be, but yeah, no one's an expert on any of them, on any of these cryptids. And also number two, I'm not a dogman researcher. I know a lot about dogmen, but yeah, I'm not a dogman researcher. I don't head out into the field looking for these guys. I go into the woods, but I never go into the woods looking for dogmen. So yeah, I just focus on helping the eyewitnesses. Thank you for that.
Thank you for correcting me on that.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I just focus on, my main purpose is helping dogman eyewitnesses come to terms with their encounters. Yeah. I speak with tons and tons of Sasquatch eyewitnesses because after all, I do produce 2 Bigfoot podcasts, but I don't help them come to terms with their Sasquatch experiences. I've got my plate full trying to keep up with the dogman eyewitnesses who contact me. Yeah. Some days I have as many as 7 or 8 brand new dogman eyewitnesses I've never heard from before contacting me. So wow. You can imagine the volume. Over the years, I've literally spoken with thousands upon thousands of dogman eyewitnesses. But yeah, I spoke with my first dogman eyewitness back in 2007. And it's kind of ironic. That was definitely one of the most traumatic experiences an eyewitness has ever shared with me.
Yeah.
The backstory on his encounter, it actually happened. I think his house is just inside the border of a place called Land Between the Lakes. It's right between
LBL.
Tennessee and Kentucky, the LBL, that's right. And he was married back then. I don't know if he still is or not. Again, this happened in 2007 when he told me about his encounter, but it does make the hackles stand up when you think about what happened to him that night. Yeah. He had the house to himself. It was just him and his dog. His wife was enjoying a night out with the girls, and he was just, from what I remember, laying on his bed upstairs. It was a 2-story house. He was laying up on his bed. It was fairly late at night. He was watching TV, and the rest of the house was quiet. So he's laying there watching TV, and all of a sudden he heard this noise, what sounded like some kind of a strange noise coming from downstairs. Well, the way his house was set up, if you walked out his bedroom door, where he was laying, you could look right out his bedroom door, if I remember correctly, and see the stairs. The stairs led down into the kitchen, and at the top of the steps, you had a perfect view of the back door, which was basically in the back kitchen wall. Well, they had a big dog, and because of that, they had a big dog door in that back door. Well, he kept hearing the strange sound that sounded like it was coming from downstairs, and he was thinking, what in the world is that? Because everyone knows, your house settles and makes all these strange noises, but he kept hearing kind of like the same sound, and he couldn't place it. So finally, he muted the television, got up, and walked towards the top of the steps and listened. Didn't hear anything out of the ordinary. Okay, well, I must have been imagining it. So he goes back and lays on the bed, and then shortly afterwards, he hears that same sound again, or he could swear that he heard that same sound. So he muted the television and just laid there and nothing. So then he turned the volume back on and was laying there, and then he heard that sound again. So he left the TV on, the volume of the TV on, got up and snuck over to the top of the steps, I guess, and looked down, and to his horror, he didn't know about dogmen back then, but he was about to get an education. He looked down the steps, and again, he could get a full view of that back door with the big dog door in it. Well, to his horror, he could see the head and one arm of a dogman poking through that dog door, as the dogman was apparently trying to gain entry into his house. But it was too big. Its other shoulder that wasn't in the house was catching on the wall right next the door, next to the dog door, so it couldn't get through. No idea what the dogman would have done if it could have gotten in, but yeah, that's nightmare fuel right there. So yeah, that was the first encounter that's ever been shared with me. Again, back in 2007.
Wow. So that's when everything started for you in 2007 with the encounters, and your show basically started in 2007, you would say?
Yeah, right around that time, I was co-hosting a Bigfoot-specific podcast called Campfire Shadows. And we had regulars on, Tim Kumbo Baker and Jim Bear Grant. Well, they would go out and beat the bushes all the time looking for boogers, aka Sasquatch. Well, they came back in after an outing and were talking about someone saw this dog-faced booger is what they called it. And when I heard them say dog-faced booger, I knew what a booger was, but what are you talking about, a dog-faced booger? What's that? So when I dug deeper after the show, I think it was, maybe the next day, when I was talking to one of them, I found out that they were talking about what's called a dogman. So I just dug deeper into the phenomenon, and it wasn't long before I realized, okay, if you have a Sasquatch experience that's traumatized you, you can almost go to your local grocery store and find someone to help you get over your experience. But if you have an encounter with one of these guys, these dogmen, where do you go to try and get help? I thought, you know what, there's a real need here. Well, it wasn't until years later that I put the pieces together to start the website, dogmanencounters.com. But I did. I started dogmanencounters.com. I published the website, I think it was in 2014. And then in 2015, I aired the first episode of the show, episode 1 of Dogman Encounters Radio. It was August 22nd of 2015. And since then,
I think it was with Chris, right? Chris and was it Hank? I think
Michael.
That's what it was. Chris and Michael. Yeah.
That's right, Chris Huckins, and I forgot Michael's last name. But that's right, they were the first guests on the show, and since then, I've got 518 episodes in the books, and
Congratulations, man.
Thank you. Since I started,
Awesome.
thousands and thousands of Dogman eyewitness conversations in, so it's been a wild ride.
Yeah, definitely has. Definitely a big fan. You know, definitely keeps me entertained at work, and I hope I never encounter anything like that. It seems like it's something really intense that kind of changes the dynamic of your life in a way, you know. But yeah, it's really, really compelling stories, you know. You could tell that these people really lived through it. And if anybody's interested, definitely go check it out. Vic, have you had any encounters of your own with anything paranormal, anything cryptid, any phenomenon?
Not with dogmen, but I've had a few encounters with what I believe were Sasquatch. Back a little over 40 years ago, I was deer hunting in the middle of absolute nowhere. And I can't see how it could have been anything other than a massive Sasquatch, literally feet behind me. I was leaning up against this huge oak tree on the side of this big hollow, and it's deer season, so there were tons of leaves on the forest floor and all that. So nothing could have gotten anywhere near me without me hearing it. Nothing, especially with lungs the size of what I heard. Basically, the gist of what happened was I went to this man's farm with him for opening day of deer season. And the morning of season, the morning that season opened up, since it was right by his property, or it might have been on his property, the outskirts of a big farm, he took me out to this spot where he told me he was going to leave me, and then he was going to be hunting a few ridges over. I mean, it was just an area with just huge hollows. So he was probably hunting maybe a quarter mile or maybe more away from me. Well, I sat at the spot where he told me to hunt, leaning up against this big oak tree, a huge oak tree. And I was there sitting in place before the sun came up. And I sat there until afternoon. And I think I didn't see anything. There was no movement or anything. Nothing was going on. Well, I can't remember what time it was accurately or anything like that, but I'm pretty sure it was just a little bit afternoon. I was sitting there, and I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. He had a horse named Red that he warned me to stay away from because it was really dangerous. Well, I'm sitting there just lost in my thoughts, looking around. Nothing's going on, no movement. And then all of a sudden, I hear this loud whinny come from right behind me. So I thought, oh no, is that Red? And then, not long after the whinny, I heard what sounded just like a horse blow. Now, horses can only breathe through their nostrils. A lot of people don't realize that horses cannot breathe through their mouths. That's just their physical adaptation. That's how they're put together. Well, because of that, that's why horses, you hear them clearing their nostrils all the time. For miniature irritants in their noses and dust and all that. But if they get something crossways up there, instead of doing a normal snort, they'll do what's called a blow, where it's kind of like a horse cough, where they fill their lungs, you can hear them suck wind, and then they just, in a concussive effort, they let that out. And if you're not expecting it, it can make you jump out of your boots. I mean, it is loud and violent. Well, that's what I heard coming from right behind me. I'm a big guy. There aren't too many guys bigger than I am, but there's no way anyone, period. I couldn't approach. My lung volume isn't even in the same neighborhood of being big enough.
How tall are you, Vic?
Remotely big enough. I'm kind of ridiculous about personal details. I don't even reveal that. But yeah, I mean, the lung volume that would have been required to make the horse blow sound that I heard, those lungs had to belong to an animal that was 1,000 pounds or more. I mean, it was just ridiculous, the volume, how loud it was and how much air I heard move. Well, I'm sitting there, and if you think about it, there's no way that any horse could have gotten anywhere near me without me hearing it way off because of all the tree trash, the leaf litter on the slopes of the hollow I was on, the huge hollow. Number two, the slope was so steep, a horse would have to be crazy to even try to go down into that hollow because the slope was ridiculously steep. So if it's not a horse, what else could it have been that, number one, was able to sneak up on me to literally be just feet behind me? And number two, that same creature had to have lungs that you would expect to belong to a 1,000 plus pound creature. So you tell me, if it wasn't a Sasquatch, what could it have been? So that's why I believe, that's why I'm convinced it must have been one. But I've had a couple, 2, 3 other experiences that I do believe were Sasquatch related, but I can't say definitively that that's what it was I was dealing with.
Yeah, and how did you feel when you went through that encounter? What were your thoughts? How did you feel?
Pretty isolated. I felt pretty isolated, like I was literally in the middle of nowhere, which I was. I had company. I mean, he was just probably a quarter mile to half a mile away, but yeah, I felt like I was the only man on earth at that point because of what was going on.
Do you feel like time stood still? Do you feel like you smelled anything? Maybe fear kicked in, flight or fight?
There never was any loss of the ambient noises. There wasn't any sense of time being altered or anything like that. No funny smells. The only thing to tip me off to there being a presence right there behind me were those two sounds. First the whinny, then the loud blow.
Wow. Yeah. That's very intense stuff, you know? Definitely something that, you know, makes you think, what was that, you know? What could that have been, you know? So yeah. And that's one encounter. You said you had a couple other encounters? Would it be something you could share on the show with us here?
Sure. Yeah, I've had like 2 or 3. Let's see now. Which one was the one? Yeah, the one that happened after that might have been a Sasquatch was when I was taking a walk out in the country one day with my dog. And to get where I was at, where I saw what I'm pretty sure was a Sasquatch, but I don't know for sure that it was because of the distance, I had to walk up and over this arched bridge that went over this creek. Well, it was like a creek brook, that kind of size body of water going underneath it. Well, I walked up and over the arched bridge, and then I walked in between two, I walked through down this path through a green field. So I've got basically green field on one side of me, green field on the other side of me. And it was grown up pretty tall. The green field was about 6 feet tall. So I could barely see over the top of it. Wow. And I was about maybe a quarter mile or so, or a hair more than a quarter of a mile from that bridge when I decided to turn around and head back to the truck. Well, I turned around and hadn't walked very far when all of a sudden, as I'm looking this way, looking that way, I look up ahead towards where that bridge is. Well, because the green field was about 6 feet tall, I couldn't see the bridge, but I could see anything that was on it. So suddenly I see this figure come up and into view that looked like a man that was wearing all black with a sweatshirt, a hooded sweatshirt, with the hood pulled up over his head, with a prominent point sticking up. Problem was, it was pretty darn hot out, number one. Now, people do wear sweatshirts even when it's hot out, but as he came running up to the top of the arch, I could see his legs kind of doing this funny plucking maneuver up off the bridge. Had a strange running style, is the best way to put it. Instead of running the way a normal person would, he just had this weird plucking motion, just almost intentionally plucking his feet up off of the bridge and all as he was running, jogging. He wasn't moving very fast. He was kind of moving in what would be a fast jog for a human. But yeah, it came up and over the bridge and then came down to the other side. And by that time, I could actually still see him when he got down to my side of the bridge, because I'm walking kind of fast at that point. Well, he turned to his right. It turned to its right, my left, and just continued on. And by the time I got through the green field and to the point where I could turn and look left down in the direction that he was traveling, didn't see anything. It wasn't there. So was it a Sasquatch? I don't know, but if I was a betting man, I think it probably was.
What other details you could give us about that encounter besides the pointed, hooded looking head and the way it ran? Did the hair look a certain color? Was it, black? Some people say they see black. Some people say they see red, brown.
Well,
what do you remember about that?
If it was a Sasquatch, her fur was short, had to be short, because I didn't see any stringy hair hanging off of him, her. I just saw uniform color, black, just black. Wow. And if it was a person, then that person was wearing pants and a top that were literally the same color. Now, I wasn't close enough to see much in the way at all of detail, but I didn't see any details of a face or anything like that. Just basically this black outline coming towards me up and over the bridge. And then as it hit the ground on my side of the bridge, it turned into his right, my left, and just continued on. And that's basically all there was to it. I couldn't really make out any other details.
Man. And how did you feel with this encounter? Did you feel any different than the first encounter that you had?
Well, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid at all. I was kind of frustrated that if it was a Sasquatch, it had to wait till I was that far away to come up and over the bridge and make its presence known. I just wish I was really wishing that I could have been close enough to make out more details, but I wasn't. Yeah. So that's all there is to that.
Definitely. Wow. Yeah, even coming across something like that, even if it's far away, it gives you that sense of, you're not really alone out there,
Oh, yeah.
Whether it's, whether you said it's a Sasquatch, a Bigfoot, or even another person, but it's like, man, you never know what's out there, You definitely got to keep your eyes peeled for anything,
That's right, because, you never know what just might be out there. As far as details go, there is one last thing that I can share with you. If it was a Sasquatch, it wasn't a big one, because looking at when it was coming up and over that bridge, I'm pretty sure that he or it wasn't any taller than I am. So if it was a Sasquatch, it definitely wasn't a big one.
Right. Maybe a juvenile,
Must have been, if that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's very interesting stuff right there. Yeah. And you said you had one more encounter, right? Is that something that you could share with us and the audience?
Well, there were two more potential experiences. Well, the last one, I'm pretty darn sure it was a Sasquatch. It's the same category, but I didn't see one. Yeah. The third one, I just might have seen a Sasquatch's leg. I was going down this country road way out, and I looked down for something, looked down towards the center console or down into the truck for something. And then when I picked my head back up to look down the road, on the left-hand side of the road, I could swear that I saw what looked like a black furry leg disappear behind a tree, like something had run across the road, and I looked up just in time to see it disappear behind a tree. When I got to the spot where I saw what I thought I saw, I looked, but I didn't see anything. So unless I was hallucinating, I don't know what the story was behind that, but I was just kicking myself. I looked down at of all the times I decided to look down if it actually was one, what in the world?
Man. That's pretty interesting, man. It's very interesting. Wow.
Yeah, my experiences have been they've all had kind of like a little twist to it. No crystal clear, bam, there he or she is. It's just always been a matter of twists to them. The most recent one happened about 3 months ago, I guess it was, 2-3 months ago. I walked for miles. I've got a big forest near me. And I just walk miles through the forest when I get time free to be able to do that. Conveniently, that is. And I don't take anyone with me, don't carry a gun when I go. And I just go out there and focus on enjoying the woods and everything. Well, on one of those walks about 2-3 months ago, I was a little over a mile in when all of a sudden, and it wasn't a windy day, there was a little bit of a breeze, but it definitely wasn't windy. Well, I'm walking and all of a sudden I hear something not really crashing through the trees, but kind of flying through the leaves and branches and all. And when I heard that, it was behind me. I turned around and looked just in time to see this walnut flying sideways like it had been thrown. It definitely hadn't been dropped. I could see it flying sideways. It had been thrown and it hit the ground and it rolled pretty darn close to the path of travel where I'd walked through the forest. And when that happened, I immediately looked up into the branches for squirrels or anything like that could have been responsible. But again, it didn't fall straight down. It was flying sideways and rolled after it hit. It probably rolled about 12 feet. Well, I didn't see hide nor hair of any squirrels. Number one, no squirrels. Number two, there weren't any walnut trees anywhere around. This was a pine forest, or this is a pine forest. Yeah. So you can't easily explain that away. I don't know what else it could have been other than a walnut that was thrown. Could it have been a person hiding in the woods with camo or something like that threw it? That's possible, but
it's possible, yeah. But usually there's a lot of camaraderie amongst people in the woods. Usually it's especially if people are hunting and stuff like that, right? From what I hear, I've never hunted or anything like that, but from what I hear, people are usually, very, hey, how are you? Good. How are you? They not really much of a prankster mentality, It's crazy enough you're out there in the woods,
No doubt.
What do you think when that walnut was thrown? Do you think that was like a warning or something playful? What were your thoughts behind that? Do you think it was something malicious?
I was thinking it must have been a juvenile Sasquatch just messing with me. It's probably seen me tons of times as I've walked through the woods and all. And that day, it might have just been feeling kind of randy and decided to throw that walnut and mess with me.
Right. Wow. So a follow-up question on all your encounters, right? In your opinion, Vic, what do you feel Sasquatch, Bigfoot is? Do you feel like it's something physical, more paranormal? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, they do things that point soundly towards them being supernatural in origin, but they also do a lot of things that point towards them just being flesh and blood creatures that are out there trying to make a living. So I don't really know what to think about that. I mean, you talk with so many eyewitnesses that report seeing things, experiencing things that point soundly towards these guys being ethereal. And then before you know it, you talk with tons of other experiencers who talk about witnessing things that you just say, okay, yeah, what they're dealing with and reporting, that soundly points towards the Sasquatch that they saw being just a flesh and blood creature. I don't know. Well, if you do what I do, you just bounce back and forth, being convinced that it's one way, and then before you know it, you're convinced it's the other way. So I can't really answer that for you.
Yeah. Makes sense, Could be both, Could be interdimensional, maybe, you know?
Might be.
A lot of theories bouncing out there, you know, that you hear and you come across. So what can you, what is one of your top memorable stories somebody on your show has shared? I don't want you to pick favorites. I just want you to pick something maybe that, you know, one of the best stories told, maybe something very compelling and interesting that somebody might have shared on your show, if you don't mind sharing with the audience.
Well, by far and away, the most popular episode has been episode 117. That's the episode where a guest named GT came on and talked about how when he had just gotten married back, I think he was in his 20s at the time, he had this hot rod Dodge Coronet that he was really proud of, that he had hopped up and everything. And he was driving home from dropping his girlfriend off late one night through the country, and this dogman decided to make its presence known. He was driving next to this pasture, a big pasture that was backed up by this forest, and all of a sudden this big dogman was running along the tree line and veered across that pasture and came over the fence that was bordering the road and ran up alongside of his Coronet, and actually wound up sticking his head, well, partially into the passenger window of his car. And naturally, it just traumatized him beyond all get out. But by far and away, that's the most popular episode of the show that I've ever done.
Wow. Yeah.
You really have to feel for him. He was some type of a government officer back then. I forgot which state it was. I think maybe Virginia or something, or South Carolina, but he was actually a government official. So JW actually isn't his name. He used that just to protect his identity.
Yeah, of course. You know, some people feel it's okay to protect their identity. Some people just don't want the ridicule, you know, the backlash of, you know, being called a liar or whatever it is, you know. So I definitely understand that, you know. So for somebody, right, what advice can you give to someone, Vic, if they have an encounter with Dogman?
If someone has an encounter with a dogman, and I'm asked that a lot, I just recommend that you treat it like you're encountering a grizzly bear. Don't do anything to trigger its predatory response or make it think that you're challenging its dominance or anything like that. Don't run. I'd recommend standing sideways. Definitely don't make eye contact, and just as calmly and coolly as you can abscond from the area. But do so again without looking directly at it, and don't turn your back on it. I know that's a tall order, but that's what I'd recommend doing.
Yeah. Seems like it's almost something that you just want to turn and run, you know? Kind of fear kicks in. You just want to turn and run, but definitely some good advice right there. You know, treat it like a predator animal, you know? So definitely just no eye contact, like you said, and back away slowly. Do you have any other thoughts or anything else you'd like to share with me and the audience, Vic?
Well, I think one of the biggest mistakes most people who know about dogmen, that is, know about their existence, but don't know very much about them. There's a difference between knowing about the existence of something, knowing something is extant, versus actually knowing about that creature, entity, whatever you name it. And that mistaken idea that's so popular, so common amongst people like that, is the idea that these guys are wired by nature to just rip you apart as soon as they have the opportunity. That's just not the case. I mean, you're listening to a guy who's literally spoken with thousands upon thousands of eyewitnesses. Tons of them were caught dead to rights in a situation where if that dogman had been wired to rip them apart as soon as the opportunity presented itself, I wouldn't have that conversation with that eyewitness. Now, I'm never going to say that dogmen have never killed people, because I'm sure they have. But then again, you're going to have deviant examples of anything. I mean, they're deviant horses, camels, pigs, goats, people, house cats. Yeah. You've got deviant examples of every critter out there that is dangerous and will hurt you if they have the opportunity. The only thing that has to happen for them to actually hurt you is for them to have that opportunity and access to you. If they have an opportunity to do it and access to you, they will hurt you or kill you if they have the ability to do that. And yeah, I fully do believe that dogmen are included in that list, just like everything else. But what I'm getting at here is if dogmen were wired to jump on the opportunity anytime the opportunity presented itself to kill a person, they would, then I wouldn't have spoken with thousands upon thousands of people who could have been attacked. But they were allowed to leave the situation, the encounter, without suffering a single scratch, not a single hair in their heads being harmed. Now, I will tell you this, over the years I've been doing this, I have spoken with 6 or 7 credible eyewitnesses who told me about being intentionally harmed by the dogmen they encountered. That's proof right there to me that, yes, there are certain circumstances where dogman encounters will become dangerous. But yeah, when it boils down to it, when you step back and look at the grand picture, it's clear these guys show a ridiculous amount of restraint when it comes to their encounters that they have with people. So as hard as it is to believe and wrap your mind around, you're safer if you have an encounter with a dogman. You run a lower risk of being harmed than if you interact with a horse or a dog or a house cat or a pig. Again, I know that's hard to wrap your mind around, but the numbers clearly say that. If you polled 3,000-4,000 people, okay, how many of you have ever been intentionally harmed by a horse that you've interacted with? Well, you know, hundreds of those people would hold their hands up. But, and you swap those people who have interacted with horses, okay, let's poll 4,000 people who have had direct interactions with camels or goats or pigs or elephants or house cats. Again, if you're asking 3,000-4,000 people that question, the number of yeses are going to be in the hundreds. But yeah, you're listening to a guy who has spoken with that many dogman eyewitnesses, and the grand total of credible eyewitnesses who have said, yes, I've been intentionally harmed by the dogman or dogmen I've encountered, 6 or 7, that right there tells you that these guys show a ridiculous amount of restraint. That's why I say what I do about these guys not being wired to kill you on sight.
Yeah, definitely. And man, why do you think, in your opinion, right? Because nobody really knows, but in your opinion, why do you think they have so much restraint towards people, towards humans?
Well, they're intelligent. If there's a reward in hurting or killing people, such as feeding on us, then that would make sense. But there's a reason behind everything they do, especially when you consider how intelligent they are. They just might have human level intelligence, and in certain ways, intelligence that supersedes our own. But yeah, unless there's a reward, a payoff for them harming us, then what motivation would they have for doing that? No, I think it's clear after speaking with so many eyewitnesses over the years, it's clear to me that they do that just to get a rise out of us. They get some form of enjoyment or benefit out of doing that. Do they feed off of our fear somehow? Are they ethereal beings that can actually feed off of our fear? Well, maybe. That's a good explanation for why they do what they do, seeking out encounters with eyewitnesses. I don't have that definite answer, though, why they do that. All I can tell you is that they clearly seem to just get a lot of benefit out of trying to mortify us to within an inch of our life.
Definitely. That's definite right there. Do you think there's any connection with Bigfoot and dogmen? Any correlation there at all, in your opinion?
Well, other than occasionally coming together, apparently, I think normally they mix like oil and water, but there have been quite a few credible eyewitnesses over the years who have reported seeing them together. But yeah, I don't think you see all these crazy ideas postulated about how a dogman resulted from a wolf breeding with a Sasquatch, and that's how dogmen came to be. That's nonsense. Absolute nonsense. And yeah, to answer your question, I don't think there's any kind of a physical correlation between the two, because number one, Sasquatch have fingernails and toenails. Dogmen, every single dogman out there, whether you're talking about a canine type with a canine style head and digitigrade style legs with hocks and stifled joints instead of ankles and knees, well, if you're talking about canine type dogmen like that, or type 3 dogmen that have hominid style legs, you know, they can look like a Sasquatch with a baboonish type head. They have other looks too, just like the canine types do, but nonetheless, any kind of dogman has claws, has bone anchored claws on the tips of their fingers and on their toes. Well, that right there is one huge variance in adaptations between claws, bone-anchored claws, and fingernails and toenails. I've seen it postulated on that also, that as far as type 3s go, some people say, well, maybe those are just Sasquatch that were born with claws. No, you're not just born with claws when your species normally has fingernails and toenails. The difference is miles apart. You don't just happen to be born with bone-anchored claws when your species is adapted to has the DNA programming for fingernails and toenails. So yeah, that is absolute nonsense. That can't be the case. So to answer your question, yeah, apparently in some instances they do spend time together, but they normally don't. As far as a physiological relationship there between the two, I'd say it's clear that that can't be the case.
Well, thank you for that. Vic, any final comments or anything you'd like to share here before we close out this episode?
Yeah, I'd like to just say, if you've had a Dogman encounter, even though it might seem like it, it is not the end of the world. Dealing with your experience has everything to do with seeing the true nature of what was going on and not allowing how frightening these guys are to look at and be around to ruin your life. I mean, there's so many young people out there who, unfortunately, it's understandable, but it's understandable because very few people know anything about dogmen. So if you don't know anything about these guys and you are made to bear an encounter with one, it's understandable that it would ruin your life and frighten you out of the woods for good. But when I talk with eyewitnesses who reach out to me, I just try to make it crystal clear to these people that, okay, this dogman, it was towering over you. It had you dead to rights. It could have done anything it wanted to do to you. And the good news is it did do what it wanted to do, and it did not do anything that it did not want to do. So the fact that you walked out of that experience without a scratch means it definitely did not want to harm you. So yeah, if you've had an encounter with one of these guys, please try not to let your human nature get the best of you and cause you to think about your experience in ways that has nothing to do with reality. And if you can focus on the truth of what happened to you, that's literally all that's required for you to deal with your experience in a healthy way. Now, there are other things that I share with eyewitnesses too to help talk them off the wall, but in a gist, that's basically what an eyewitness would need to know.
It's amazing. Very, very good stuff right there to take, for anybody that's listening. Take all that advice into consideration and, always carry that with you and always hold on to your truth, like Vic said, in other words, and speak up about it, because just like somebody that has had an encounter with cryptids, Bigfoot, or dogmen, there's plenty of other people out there, that have had similar experiences as well. So you're not alone, Vic, can you tell the audience one last time before we close out where they can find you and your work, please?
Sure. If you've had a dogman encounter and would like to speak with me about it, whether you want to just talk with me about it because you're having trouble coming to terms with it, or if you want to come on Dogman Encounters Radio and share your experience with the listeners, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. If you've had a Sasquatch experience and would like to be a guest on my Bigfoot sighting, for example, please go to mybigfootsighting.com and fill out a guest request form. If you would rather be on Bigfoot Eyewitness Radio, please go to bigfooteyewitness.com and submit a report. And then lastly, if you've had a paranormal experience, whether we're talking an experience with a ghost, a demonic experience, UFO abductions, UFO sightings, or I guess that's alien abductions, UFO sightings, a strange cryptid encounter from the ground up, if it didn't involve a Sasquatch encounter or a dogman encounter, and you'd like to come on My Paranormal Experience, then please go to myparaex.com and let me know. And that's all there is to it.
Definitely. And I'll make sure I get all these links and all the names of your podcast so I could put in the description of this episode. Vic, thank you so much for being on this show. It's been an honor. Wow. It's definitely an honor to have you on my show, man. I remember when I hit you up, I was like, man, what's the worst that can happen? He might not reply or say no. So let me take a chance. And I'm very grateful that you were able to come on the show. So thank you so much, man.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you guys for watching another episode of Apocalyptic Anomalies. There you have it. Vic Cundiff from Dogman Encounters Radio. Thank you for watching, everybody. Have a good night. Bye. Thank you for watching the show, everyone. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. And remember to share the show because that's the only way that the podcast will grow. Until next time, everyone, stay safe, stay blessed, and remember to innovate honesty and always illuminate the truth. Bye.